The Broken Blueprint, author Vince Farrell, narrated by Samuel Nathan. Part 1C, Battle Creek and Walla Walla. Prescott takes over. In 1883, the College of Battle Creek was reopened under the direction of Elder W. H. Littlejohn, a blind minister with no degrees. He served well for 2 years, but in 1885, the board decided to find someone who had a degree. The position was offered to W. W. Prescott, a graduate of Dartmouth College, and an experienced workman who had a print shop and published a magazine. Prescott headed the school for 10 years, that is 1885 to 1895, and during those years he himself was more thoroughly converted, although he tended to slip away from the spirit of prophecy after the turn of the century. Quote, by 1889, with the viral demise of the work-study program at Battle Creek College, lively students sought other ways of expending their energies. Baseball, football, soccer, and tennis became popular. Soon teams formed and competitive matches were arranged. One football game between Americans and British students produced unusual excitement. A local press report of the game came to Ellen White's attention in far-off Australia. She was accosted and soon directed a sharp rebuke to President Prescott. A Seventh-day Adventist school was not to be a place for students to perfect themselves in sports, Ellen White wrote. This would be to follow the worldly plan of recreation and amusement, and would result in loss every time. Prescott and his faculty saw the danger. Match games were prohibited. End of quote. Taken from R.W. Scour's Light Bearers to the Remnant, page 199. During those 10 years, 4 more schools were established. Union College at College View, Nebraska in 1891, Walla Walla College in Washington State in 1892, that is with E.A. Sutherland as principal, Graceville Academy, that is later called Southern Missionary College in Tennessee in 1893, and Keene Academy, that is later Southwestern, in Texas in 1894. At the 1893 General Conference session, W. W. Prescott made this jewel of a statement, quote, the basis on which students should be encouraged to earn work in securing an education is an important matter. You know to what extent it is coming to be a practice in educational institutions in almost every line. The marking, that is credit or grading, system very generally encourages a feeling of rivalry. The basis of the work is thus made to be personal ambition. It is not so much to personal excellence, nor to reach any certain ideal, but to be above a neighbor. Of 2 students with different capacities, one may be much less hard work than the higher rank, and yet his fellow students may do better work and be a better student. The true basis seems to me to be this. Everyone is endowed with certain capacities and faculties. God has for him a certain ideal which he can reach by the proper use of time and opportunities. He is not to be satisfied with the fact that he outstrip his neighbor. His effort should be to get what God would have him, and success to meet the ideal the Lord has for him in view of his capacity and opportunity. His neighbor, who may only have half the capacity, will reach the same degree of success and will be worthy of the same commendation if he reaches the ideal that God has for him in view of his capacity and his opportunity. The true basis of credit is not by comparing one with another to see if one secures better standing or more prize than his neighbor, but to compare the actual standing of every student with the ideal which God intends he should gain in view of the capacity which he was endowed and the opportunities God's providence has given him. This is a very different basis than simply the ideal of personal ambition to exalt another. It is very much easier for a teacher to impel one to earnest work by appealing to personal ambition, because it is a trait of human nature easily cultivated. So many teachers, as being the easiest method to get work, that is, they say, out of students, appeal to them on the basis of their standing as compared with the other. But that trait of human nature needs no cultivation. It is the same old self. When the mind of Christ is brought into our plans and education, the purpose will not be to draw out and strengthen elements of self, but it will be, as in all other parts of the work, to empty oneself, to take a humble position, and yet by that very means to attain to an exaltation impossible in any other way. End of quote. Taken from W. Prescott, 1893 General Conference Bulletin, pages 357 to 358. In the same degree of the 1890s, as noted earlier, a training school was established in South Africa, that is, Solusi in Rhodesia, modern Kenya, in 1894. And Ellen White started another one in Australia, that is Avondale, in Korangbong in 1897. During those years, she wrote extensively on the blueprint for our schools. One person who studied her writing very carefully was E.A. Sutherland, head of Walla Walla College, who instituted several important reforms. He would later figure prominently in the effort to salvage our educational blueprint. During this time, new academies were starting, and many of our people were studying the educational blueprint. However, some schools, including Union College, held solidly to the whole line of liberal arts and degrees. Enter Sutherland and Magan. At this juncture, we should briefly consider Sutherland and Magan. Edward Alexander Sutherland, 1865 to 1955, was a Scots ancestry and had a stirring character. In 1885, he went to Battle Creek College. 3 years later, he was deeply impressed with the message of righteousness by faith taught by Jones and Wagner in Minneapolis. In the fall of 1888, when Sutherland returned to the college for his third year, he gained a new friend, P.T. Magan. P.C. Tilson Magan, 1867 to 1947, was born in Ireland, immigrated to the United States in 1886, and joined the church that year. The following year, he worked in Nebraska as a licensed minister. In 1888, he entered Battle Creek College. A strong friendship sprang up between Sutherland and Magan. That fall, Ellen White invited young Magan to come live in her home. Sutherland visited there frequently, and as the coming years revealed, both young men learned an immense amount. Although 2 years younger than Edward, PC had a deeper walk with the Lord, and he led his friend into a similar experience. PC also taught Edward about work. While Sutherland liked baseball, PC preferred to help out wherever he was needed. He worked in the kitchen and learned to cook. In the machine shop, he became proficient with tools. Gradually, Edward recognized that PC was right when he said that the only useful activity was that which helped people. Edward, graduating in 1890, and with his wife Shelley, left to head an academy in Minnesota. Meanwhile, PC did something that within the coming months would make him famous throughout the denomination. In 1889, he went with Ezen Haskell, secretary for the Foreign Mission Board, on a journey around the world to check on the possibilities of opening new mission stations. Throughout the journey, Megan wrote 59 extremely interesting articles on their travels. These were printed in installments in the Youth's Instructor, that is January 1890 to July 1891. By 1890, Megan had been appointed Associate Secretary for the Foreign Mission Board, and the next year he was head of the Bible and History Department at Battle Creek College, that is 1891 to 1901. The Blueprint at Walla Walla. Meanwhile, in 1892, Sutherland became head of Walla Walla College. Soon after, he managed to make it the first Adventist institution to serve only vegetarian food in the cafeteria. More on that soon. Unfortunately, the man in charge had been so pressed by finances that although the school originally had 120 acres, parcel after parcel was sold off, until only a small portion of the original acreage remained. This had occurred before the Sutherlands arrived in the West to take over the college. Ed Sutherland recognized that the old mistakes of Battle Creek were being reenacted here in Walla Walla. When Ellen White in Australia had the most of the land at Walla Walla had been sold off, she wept again. You will find in this book that she wept many times. Sutherland set to work to educate the new faculty into spirit of prophecy principles, and for the first time an entire faculty heartily took hold of them. When farmers who had purchased some of those parcels found they could not pay for them, Sutherland purchased them back. Before long, he bought back 80 acreage, and Mr. Addlestone, the farm manager, could begin developing the gardens, orchards, and fields. Soon the teachers were working part-time with the students in industrial labor or on the school farm. They taught practical and vocational instructions as part of their curriculum. Sutherland would get up at 5 a.m. each morning to handle his end of the cross-cut saw with a student as his partner. A great deal of wood had to be cut to supply the needs of the institution, and Sutherland did his full share of the work. He demonstrated one of his firm principles, that all teachers and all students should spend more time each day working together at productive manual labor. He said that Ellen White had earlier told him that if the youth can have but a one-sided education, a knowledge of the science or a knowledge of the labor for practical life, let it be the latter. While still at Walla Walla, he got the school to stop serving meat in the cafeteria. Quote, classes at Walla Walla College began in December 1892, while Prescott added the presidency of the new school to those he already carried at Battle Creek and Union. Direction was really in the hands of E. A. Sutherland, principal. The man of strong conviction, Sutherland convened his faculty for a week or more prior to opening day in order that each member might jointly study Ellen White's Council on Education. From the start, Walla Walla College demonstrated its commitment to health reform by serving only a local ovo-vegetarian diet. It was the first Seventh-day Adventist school to take this step. End of quote. Taken from R.W. Squaws, Light Bearers to the Remnant, page 201. Within 2 months after the school reopened that first year, the enrollment had increased to 165. The rooms were occupied as fast as the carpenters finished them. However, there were only 1,551 Adventists in the Northwest at that time. Nearby, Whiteman College had been in operation for 25 years, yet only at about 100 students. When the faculty sent a letter to the General Conference pleading for funds to solve the problem of the girls' and boys' dormitories, each having only one shower and bathroom, a letter came back in the mail. When they opened it, they found inside specific and detailed information on how to take a bath in the wash basin. So they purchased a pitcher and a basin for each dormitory room. DeGraw arrives. At the end of the school year, that is in 1893, Sutherland was ordained to the gospel ministry. Because of its later importance, another event which occurred that year should be noted. A young lady, M. Bessie DeGraw, 1871 to 1965, who had just finished a year at Battle Creek College, arrived on campus. She should have remained to finish her studies at Battle Creek, but Prescott asked her to journey to Walla Walla to help at the new college. DeGraw was a woman with a powerful mind and rash determination. Rather quickly, Sutherland won her over to the educational blueprint. For the next 60 years, she worked with the Sutherlands to fulfill it. During the second school year, courses were offered in cooking, printing, gardening, and dairying. Students could help earn their tuition by cutting timbers in the nearby mountains, which the school hauled to town to sell. Quote, Sutherland, officially promoted to the presidency in the school's second year of operation, was not a believer in traditional curricula and degrees. Instead, he launched a short one-year course designed especially to prepare mature students as effective church employees. End of quote. That is taken from R.W. Squaws, Light Bearers to the Remnant, page 201. During the third year, short courses were offered for those who wished to make a speedy preparation to enter the Lord's work. Sutherland attributed the financial education and spiritual progress to a faculty devoted to the light given through Ellen White. They diligently studied articles on education coming from Australia, especially during 1895 to 1896. For this purpose, they often studied together in groups. They read with deep interest about what was happening at Avondale School in Australia, where Ellen White was living, which was operating on blueprint principles. They recognized that finding and knowing the truth without prompt and willing obedience could be a snare instead of a blessing, and they pledged to follow the light wherever it might lead us. Sutherland and Megan at Battle Creek. In February 1897, the General Conference session assembled at College View, Nebraska. Listened in rapt attention to Sutherland's description of what had been done at Walla Walla during the 4 years he had been there, that is from 1893 to 1897, and of the faculty's continued dedication to the work. Before the session was over, the delegates devoted to call the Sutherlands and Bessie DeGraw to Battle Creek College. Many of those in Battle Creek wanted him to institute the change marked out in the testimonies. P.C. Megan had been on the Battle Creek faculty for many years, and the two men were together again. But now they had a third team member, Bessie DeGraw. The three of them labored earnestly to fulfill the Spirit of Prophecy blueprint for the college at Battle Creek. Under their influence, the school became vegetarian. Encouraging them in their reform was A.T. Jones and Dr. J. H. Kellogg. On July 27, 1897, Megan was ordained in the ministry in the tabernacle. His friend Sutherland, who had been ordained in 1895, preached the sermon. Under his leadership, the college altered its course of study. The curriculum became more flexible, enabling the students to choose the subject they desired. On November 1st, 1897, the review carried an announcement from President Sutherland offering short courses for mature students, missionary workers, teachers, bookkeepers, and canvassers. These short courses were only 12 weeks in length. In 1898 to 1899, the college, operating under a new charter, discontinued the granting of academic degrees. The August issue of the School Journal, The Advocate, included the quotations from the Roman Catholic pamphlet. The conferring of degree was originated by the Pope. The announcement was made. The college, under its new organization, ceases with this year to grant degree. Preparation for usefulness in the cause of Christ will be the subject constantly held before students, replacing the courses and diplomas of the past. Beginning with its second year, the little journal was renamed the Training School Advocate and was sent to believers in a wide area. Sutherland edited the paper, DeGraw assisted, and Megan published it. But instead of a new faculty which they could educate into the blueprint, Sutherland and Megan had a faculty on their hands which were quite satisfied with the classical method of earlier years at Battle Creek. Go to class, teach some Latin, and go home again that afternoon without getting one's hands dirty in the garden. It was hard for some to recognize that the testimonies were a revelation from God. More changes at the colleges. Another big problem was the fact that the campus of Battle Creek College only covered 7 acres and could not expand. It was right in town. Both men recognized that much would be lost if they could not unite physical effort with mental labor. Ellen White had warned against allowing students to occupy the lesser hours with frivolous pleasures which weakened the moral power. So, one Sunday morning, Ed Sutherland held the plow and Megan drove the team, while 225-pound J.G. Lamson set on the beam, and the three of them plowed up the tennis court and turned it into a vegetable garden. Then friends came forward and donated money with which to purchase an 80-acre farm. Although it lay at some distance from the campus, fruit trees, shrubs, and vines were set out on 30 acres, and the remainder was planted with vegetables, legumes, and root crops that would supply the college with fresh produce. Another advantage was that the new farm provided employment for students. In January 1899, great emphasis was placed on regular missionary work. A mission was established in Jackson, 40 miles to the east. 8 students would work there for 2 or 4 weeks, treating the sick, ministering to the needy, and holding meetings in the evening. Holmer Slibbery, one of the faculty members, directed this project. Other students carried on similar work in Battle Creek. It was at about this time that Sutherland came across a poem which he treasured for years. Quote, "Then be content, poor heart, God's plan, like lilies pure and white, unfold. We must not tear the close shut leaves apart. Time will reveal the chalice of gold." End of quote. In October 1900, the Advocate announced a new book by Sutherland, a 400-page volume published by the Review, entitled Living Fountains or Broken Cisterns. This well-researched book traced true and false education from the Garden of Eden down through history, showing the effort of paganism and Catholicism, which, amongst other things, brought competition into the classroom. Although a name did not appear, much of the research and preparation of the book was done by DeGraw. That is, later she helped S.N. Haskell on 2 of his books, the story of Daniel the prophet and the story of the seer of Patmos. Megan also wrote a book, that is, The Perils of the Republic, and many articles for the Advocate. All 3 of them, that is Sutherland, DeGraw, and Megan, were researchers, writers, hard workers, and loyal to the spirit of prophecy, an excellent combination. In spite of the opposition in the community and among some of the faculty and students, other students were thrilled at the change. When Sutherland came to Battle Creek College, it was $100,000 in debt, but he set to work and much of it was eliminated. The students alone raised $6,000. Another source of income came from the scale of Christ object lessons. In 1901, Volume 6 of the Testimony came off the press and included these passages, quote, "Though in many respects our institutions of learning have swung into worldly conformity, through step by step they have advanced towards the world. They are prisoners of hope. Fate has not so woven its meshes about their working that they need to remain helpless and in uncertainty. If they will listen to His voice and follow in His ways, God will correct and enlighten them and bring them back to their upright position of distinction from the world." When the advantage of working upon Christian principle is discerned, when self is hid in Christ, much greater progress will be made. For each worker will feel his own human weakness, he will supplicate for the wisdom and the grace of God, and will receive the divine help that is pledged for every emergency. Opposing circumstances should create a firm determination to overcome them. One barrier broken down will give greater ability and courage to go forward. Press in the right direction and make a change solidly, intelligently. then circumstances will be your helper and not your hindrance. Make a beginning. The oak is in the acorn. End of quote. Taken from Testimonies, Volume 6, page 145. The need to leave Battle Creek. The cramped and urban campus at Battle Creek was not well suited to the educational concepts of Sutherland and Megan, who wanted a spacious rural setting like that of the recently founded Avondale College in Australia. Ellen White had said that agriculture was the ABCs of Christian education. At the Michigan campground in the summer of 1898, Sutherland met Dr. David Paulson, medical director of Hinsdale Sanitarium, another loyal supporter of the Spirit of Prophecy Council. The two men worked together, interviewing the scores of students who wanted to attend Battle Creek College. Paulson told Sutherland it was a shame that so many could not attend because the college lacked a farm so they could walk their way through school. Then Paulson said, "You should move the college to a large farm and establish industries where students can earn their school expense." Sutherland replied that this was the message they had been getting from Ellen White for years. Cadwalder described the incident. Quote, "The two had experienced some depression one day when they met a large number of the youth who wanted a college education but could not finance it. The two men discussed the problem, and Dr. Paulson made the suggestion that if he were in Sutherland's place, he would establish a school which would turn away no students who was willing to work. He suggested that the school ought to own a large tract of land and provide work for the students." End of quote. E.M. Cadwalder, A History of Adventist Education. Arriving back at Battle Creek, Sutherland told this to Megan, who replied, "Let's do it. Ed, let's move the college out of Battle Creek." Writing 25 years later, Megan tells us there was also another reason of moving the college out of the Battle Creek. Quote, "Another reason for taking the Battle Creek College out of Battle Creek was to get away from the worldly influences which it was very clear to some of us that J.H. Kellogg was bringing in. At the time we moved the school, approximately one half of our students were working for their expenses in the Battle Creek Sanitarium, and the doctor held a sword of Damocles over us that made it impossible to remain in Battle Creek and carry out the simple line of education which we were anxious to inculcate. This was an important reason for getting out of Battle Creek. We said little about it at the time because we were anxious to have Dr. Kellogg buy the property, and we were in no position to antagonize him, but felt sure that he was determined in time to have the Battle Creek College, a more or less worldly concern, granting degrees and catering to worldly ideas, customs, and practices. The end result is that our fear have all been justified. Sutherland and I saw this coming. We knew we were in no position to stop it, but we were determined to make a break in such a way that the doctor could not get at us, and that the denomination would have its schools in the Lake District separate and distinct from his place and machinations. In this we succeeded. End of quote. P.T. Megan, letter to Warren Howell, January 13, 1926. Fortunately, the tightly knit group of 4 leaders were ready for the crisis. Quote, "What were those like who have fought for the move?" Sutherland's, "The friend found patient and stubborn. He loved children and wanted them all to be saved. Megan, a homely Irishman, delighted all with his vogue and humor. Understanding the students and sympathetic to their problems, he often invited them to seek him for counsel after the Friday evening meetings. He had the talent of associating agreeably with persons in all levels of society. M. Bessie DeGraw was always on duty, tall, bright-eyed, and healthy. In the time of poor physical health, she dressed fastidiously. Acquaintances considered her brilliant, fluent, sincere, and somewhat mystical. Another strong personality was Mrs. Nellie Rankin Brillard. Everyone banked on her business deals because of her ability to make uncanny financial investments. End of quote. Taken from Emmett K. Van de Vere. The Wisdom Seeker, page 104 to 105. More about Nellie Brillard later. Ellen White endorses the move. The biannual session of the General Conference convened in Battle Creek in 1901, and Ellen White, who had returned the previous year to the state from Australia, was in attendance. During the session, one morning at 5, Megan was awakened and told to go at once to Ellen White's room. Quote, she asked him if he remembered when he and Professor Sutherland had, through correspondence, discussed the moving of the college out of Battle Creek. I told you at the time, she said, not to do it. Now I am ready to tell you to do it. What we will do with the whole plant I do not know. I think possibly we may be able to sell it to the sanitarium. I do not think even then that we will be able to realize enough to pay off anything on the principal. Perhaps we will get enough to pay its debts. We will have to go out single-handed, empty-handed. It is time to get out now, for great things will soon be happening in Battle Creek. End of quote. Taken from Merlin Neff, For God and for CME, page 70. Quote, God wants the school to be taken out of Battle Creek. Let us take away the excuse which has been made for families to come into Battle Creek. Some may be stirred about the transfer of the school from Battle Creek, but they need not be. This move is in accordance with God's design for the school before the institution was established. End of quote. Taken from EGW General Conference Daily Bulletin, 1901, page 216. She had been forewarned that a great crisis was headed towards Battle Creek. As you know, the years 1902 through 1908 would be difficult ones. First, the pantheism crisis, then the Bellinger crisis, and then the final split between Kellogg and the leadership. When large numbers in town chose one side or the other, many workers were deeply sharpened by the outgoing controversies. College moved to Berrien Springs. In one of the meetings at the 1901 session, Ellen White told the delegates that a good start had been made at Battle Creek College, but they should now move the school out into a farm and complete the blueprint. At the close of her talk, the delegates met and voted to do just that. They authorized the college board to move the college to a place which Sutherland should locate. The Battle Creek property was sold to the sanitarium, and Dr. Kellogg later used it as part of his American Medical Missionary College, that is, which was lost in the denomination in 1907 and permanently closed in 1910. Before anyone could change their mind, Sutherland and McGinn arranged with the railroad and 16 freight cars to haul everything 90 miles south to a location they had found on 272 acres, which had been purchased for about $18,000 near Berrien Spring, Michigan. It was named Emmanuel Missionary College. For details on the finding of the location, see History of the Great Second Advent Movement, Lesson 18, page 7 to 8. They recognized that the educational blueprint called for a country location, plenty of fertile land, teachers and students working together as the students learn how to support themselves so they can live to do successful missionary work. Amongst other subjects, they also knew that the Word of God had to be studied in the classroom so the students would become grounded and gain a deep experience in the things of God. During the summer of 1901, a denomination-wide summer school for about 150 active and prospective church school teachers was held in tents beside the river on the new school site. The selection of a site for an institution is always important. The original plan was to locate the main building on White Point, overlooking the river. Acreage around it was initially cleared for its purpose, but plans suddenly changed. Quote, two unforeseen problems suddenly altered the early plans: the shortage of safe water and the scarcity of money. They could not obtain good, usable water for a reasonable cost at White's Point, with the result that they finally placed the principal building back from the above on the flatland by the garden house. The change in plan placed the institution on a site that would allow later expansion. End of quote. Taken from E.K. van der Vere, The Wisdom Seeker, page 105.